Hello and welcome to Mini-Edge Painting. Today, I will continue unboxing and building the Champions of Sona miniatures from the Squidmar Miniatures Kickstarter of the same name. Today, I will be showcasing the Innori, or necromantic humans. Without further ado, we have 4 humans to get through. We'll start with Sigmid and her beast companions. Seems like she and many others are also done by Mindwork Studios. They have some good quality with their casts, and the material is fairly nice. No build manual with this kit, but that's fine. The included picture on the box does well to display how certain parts connect to the model. Either way, some test fits and scraping later, we are safe to start building the model. Starting with the cat, I'm gluing both halves together. There is a little bit of gap between these parts, but that is easily fixed by putting extra super glue on, and then wiping away the excess with a paper towel before it dries. I find this to be the easiest way to do a gap fill for these models. The next step was to glue the front leg onto the model. It doesn't seem to fit 100% right here, but it may be due to some shrinkage. I might try to goof off that later if it doesn't fit onto the base correctly. One of the biggest issues that I had with this model was this staff that rests on her waist. There is no truly clear way that this staff goes on. I tried each direction, flipping it multiple times, and it was rather frustrating. It took a few minutes until I was satisfied with how it looked, and glued it down. Connecting the head to the tiger was fairly easy. The connection was nice and neat. The bird on her hand, however, was a very small contact point, and I initially put too much glue on, and it was disrupting the details of her arm. So I opted to use a bit less glue and some accelerator to make it set quick and strong. With her head going on, I compared the model to the base and found that her right side didn't match up too well with the base. The tiger's right legs did not match the keys they were supposed to fit into. I can fix this with a bit of Milliput by resculpting the mounting keys. Overall, this is a fairly nice model. Let's move on to Ishard Quen. As far as the building process, I think this is my favorite so far. The model came with very nice indicators for which piece went where and assembled well. Dry fits and cleaning done. I glued the inner cape to the outer cape, as this was where the first connection was annotated. Second was the legs being glued onto the inner cape. So far, everything fits well. The third piece was the torso to the legs. This is where I started to get some issues with gaps in the model. This will be fixed with Milliput later though. The arms, head, and staff went on next without any sort of issues. The base was a bit of a tight fit, which surprised me seeing as the legs were a solid piece. The keys were also much smaller than the holes that they fit into, which was doubly strange. 2 down, 2 to go. Let's build Atl, a casting block, a cape in 2 parts, and a pretty cool sword make up a pretty neat assortment of parts. Getting stuck in, I cleaned up the parts and began by gluing the legs to the torso and dry fitting the cape to see the butt. Assless chaps are apparently all the rage among human necromantic warriors. Moving on, once the cape was glued to the back, everything was covered up. Adding the tassels to the front meant that we'd never see that again. It did give me a good laugh though. Adding the secondary cape, there was a bit of gap to fill later around the connection point of the cloak and the body. The shoulder guard covered this gap pretty nicely though. However, there was an extremely noticeable gap where the hand rests on the thigh. This wasn't an issue with me placing the hand wrongly on the thigh. There just wasn't enough wrist to connect. More post-processing work for later, I guess. The head and right arm with the sword went on easily though. No major issues with any of that. With a rope cord applied to the shield, we have finished Atl. time to move on. Skelios is the final model of this group of models. I do have to give a bit of body horror warning here, as there are some things that some may find disturbing. I originally tried to do this model second, but found parts were a bit dirty and rather confusing to put together, so I opened him but waited to build him until later. Cutting the parts from the blocks and trimming things up, I began to glue things together. The first step was to glue the hand throne to the base. Once that was down and set, I glued the legs to his body. The way the body lines up with the legs meant that his feet were dangling off the ground. I will fix this later by building up the ground with milliput, as I feel making a rock will be easier than filling in a convincing skin. The fingers of the throne are what went on next. This throne is absolutely disgusting. There are eyes on the tips of the fingers, but this is where the easiness stopped. The chains and little animals that are on said chains were a nightmare to apply. There were no super obvious places where they went. It was only on very close inspection that I noticed very small abrasions on the finger cuffs that noted where to glue the chains on. This did not help when the chains were difficult to position right. I ended up having to dab some glue onto one side of the chain and then hold it there while some accelerator was applied. In the case of the long chain between the index and thumb, I had to undo the glue around his arm and reapply it after attaching the chain, thus leaving an insecure and somewhat unnatural fit to the arm. When I was cleaning up the rat that he holds, I did not notice that his thumb was holding onto the rat's tail. I assumed it was part of the artifacts on the small critters that allowed them to get so detailed, so I clipped it off accidentally. In the end, I had to mold a small thumb for Skelios out of superglue to hold the rat steady. While I get into some reviews, let's look at some grand reveals. Starting with Signaled, I would give the building a solid 6 out of 10. The majority of the model went together easily, but the staff was annoying. The model itself deserves an 8 out of 10. The very powerful and dynamic pose is very pleasing to look at. Ishard Quen was a very easy 10 out of 10 build process. The keys having notes on what goes where was very handy. The model itself is rather bland, with not too many extra details. I felt like it could have done with some magical effects, like smoke or something. 5 out of 10. Attel gets a solid and respectable 8 out of 10 for the build process. Very easy to see where things went and how to put it together. However, the massive gap on his hand is rather annoying. The pose, stance, and hidden gem of this model give it another 8 out of 10 for the model. Fun to see just this massive bulk and big ass sword. Finally, Skelios. The chains and animals just made the build rather annoying. Once I got it figured out, it all went together neatly, but those keys are pretty much not even there. 3 out of 10. The model, however, is amazing. The detail in the throne and the presentation of everything are nice and regal. 9 out of 10. With that, we have the humans of Sona built up and ready for post-process and painting. I hope that you'll join me on the journey of painting through these guys when that day finally comes. Until then, I've been Miniage Painting, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.